Hello and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to business confidence. I first met Adrian Moorhouse MBE about 20 years ago. Back then he was already 7 or 8 years into running a leadership development consultancy called Lane 4. Adrian had won a gold medal at the Seoul Olympic Games in 1988 and was world number one in his event for 6 consecutive years, 400 metres breaststroke. And following retirement from sport, he co-founded Lane 4, which of course is the fastest qualifying lane in swimming. And what struck me about meeting Adrian all those years ago was how focused he already was on his business life rather than his former sporting glories. And sure enough, his business moved as fast as he did in the swimming pool, growing successfully over 25 years until it was bought by EY a few years ago. So, how did Adrian move so quickly and so successfully from an elite sport environment to an entrepreneurial one? Now, apologies in advance for a few crackles on the line during the course of this interview, all of which came at my end. But Adrian, of course, comes through loud and clear throughout. Here's Adrian's story.
So I think there's two bits to talk about, really. One is my need for control and like controlling my destiny, which is kind of a bit of a fundamental thing in me. And the other thing is my father was in business. And when I was about a teenager, maybe 15, he was a company director and he left the company to set his own business up from our front room or our back room, if you like. So I watched somebody in business, my dad, who was a big role model of mine. First of all, in the world of business, he was in sales. And so I sort of saw him doing that. But then when he took a punt and set his own company up, I kind of saw that and started working with him then. When I was about 15, 16, I'd do his board and sales ledger. So I started doing some of the books and take sales calls. So, because he was like a one-man band, him and my mum. And then, so I had that in my blood, if you like. And through swimming, the control thing's got interesting because I fell into swimming by accident. I mean, not falling into a pool, but it was the only thing I was good at. So at school, I used to do like rugby and cricket. I was an independent boys' school and I was pretty rubbish at other things, although I thought I was quite good, but obviously I can't have been very good because I never got picked for anything. And I thought that was, but basically I thought that was quite subjective. So the teacher would pick the squad and I'd never be in it. So I'm going, okay, well, I'm going to do something really objective. I'm going to be a swimmer. And if I win a race, they've got to pick me, whether my face fits or not. So this idea of being in charge of my own destiny was sort of very early on. And I had a tough school time at the same sort of time. I was getting a bit picked on, a bit bullied. And so again, that's a sort of feature of that where you kind of go, well, I'm going to just be my own person, if you like. So the sort of seeds of entrepreneurialism and taking charge of my own destiny sort of came from those two things. And then, of course, there's all sorts of things from sport that I can carry forward that we can move on to, if you like.
You've got this control over your destiny in the swimming pool, for start with, and so, yeah. And obviously, as anyone who sort of follows swimming, and even people who don't know swimming, so will know that you went on to win the Olympic sort of gold medal in 1988. Is that right? And
yep.
Number one in the world for sort of several years. I mean, so in that sense that you had control, but I mean, whilst that was going on, were you beginning to think, what am I doing after swimming? What happens? Because, all sportsmen eventually, retire. Yeah. So what was going through your mind at that time?
Yeah, so I was heading for my third Olympics. I had quite a long career, if you like, for a swimmer, even though I was still quite young. I was 28 when I actually finished on my third Olympics. But in the lead up to that third Games, I decided that was going to be my last Games. And at the age of 20, I started to lose a couple of races, which wasn't great, to like 19, 18-year-olds. And so I thought, well, I probably peaked now. So let me think about what I do next. Now, but having said that, I was so focused on the swimming thing. I still wanted to go out well. I didn't really put out in any feelers. And so, but I was thinking I want to have a career beyond the swimming. And that's quite important, I guess. So I didn't enjoy, and I got quite a lot of personal appearance stuff. I had an agent after my Olympic success, which was 4 years prior, when I was 24 years old. And so I realized I didn't like it. I didn't want to be like a rent-a-hero and do speeches and appearances. I didn't want I wanted to be behind the scenes. So a lot of the things I thought about was how can I get into something where I'm enabling other people or enabling something. I didn't want to be front of house. And in fact, I tried a couple of things. I did, when I first immediately stopped. I had nice opportunities because of my profile, but like being a runner in a TV company, or I was doing some stuff in a law office, legal office, to see whether that things like that really. And it was just trying a few things out in the spirit of building a new career, because I think that I decided that towards the end of my swimming career that actually I needed to learn something new, find out what I had a talent in if there was anything else. And it was not going to be easy. And it wasn't. It was really hard, actually, for maybe 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I mean the control thing. I mean, some people might think that if you are there as a celebrity, you know, opening village fetes or doing various sort of things, then that is in a way a form of control because you are the center of attention. You're the kind of guest star, if you like that. But you're talking about a different kind of control there, are you? The control over your own destiny, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a publicity thing. It's just being able to do what you wanted.
Yeah, and also I think what I'd learned towards the end of my career was I actually enjoyed being in the squad and in a team more than just being the individual that stood out. So it's a lonely old place to be when you're just sort of the one that everybody holds up. And actually, some of my better memories were in either relays or in my City of Leeds squad, my hometown squad, when we won the European Championships, for instance, as a team. So I realised that I needed to be as a team. I didn't want to keep on talking about who I used to be. I just thought there was no value. And I don't want to denigrate anybody that does this, by the way. I think, good on them. But for me, I wanted to be somebody else. I thought, well, I'm 28 years old. I think I can have another turn, if you like, of my life. And it shouldn't just be talking about what I did in the first 24 years or being known for that. And so that was a big conscious decision to try and be known for something else. But I just didn't know what it would be.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then was there a moment where that fuzzy image of something, I want to be doing something else, kind of came into sharper focus? Was there a moment in time or was it a gradual realization?
Yeah, I don't know how much you remember from our previous sort of conversations, but so my first job when I finished swimming, I got a job with the Swimming Association and I was head of talent development. So the director of swimming created a job for me actually, because they offered me a job in Australia, but I didn't really want to go. And I remember chatting to him. He said, well, look, he said to me, I know you've been quite vocal, which I had been, about talent development and talent identification in my own sport. And that I thought we wasted kids and it was a shame. And so he said, look, how about I create a job for you so you can explore it, understand what's going on and redefine the strategy. And so that was my first job. So for 3 years, I developed this talent identification development strategy for my sport, which got me interested in talent identification and development per se. And so that was the world I started to inhabit. So if you like, my identity was moving in those 3 years from being an individual performer, delivery person, to somebody who created a strategy for a national program for talent ID and development. So, and then it's an easy segue to know that then I went into human resources and I was a talent development sort of, if you like, running a talent development company, because that was my segue. Almost like, how do you get the most out of, in first instance, children, talented kids, and not just flogging them, working them hard, but what's the conditions you put around them? And then I was talking to various experts around talent, and they said, look, there's lots of key principles around talent and identification and coaching. And then I started to understand the world of human resources and leadership development.
And I can see how it broadened out, but did you sort of, excuse the pun about swimming in a lane? I mean, why didn't you sort of stick to the sport, if you like? I mean, was there a particular reason why you wanted to branch out?
Yes. So one of the sports psychologists I was a massive fan of psychology in my own career, but also bringing sort of psychology performance into my junior swimming program. But one of the guys who I think you met, Graham Jones, was my co-founder. So Graham had been an occupational psychologist. So he was a psychologist at heart. He'd applied it in sports, but he'd also been an oc-psych. And so he and I had this conversation about work he was doing in 3M. He was doing some sport work. He was moonlighting from Loughborough, doing some work with a top team in one of the divisions of 3M in Loughborough. And he was saying, look, here's how I'm applying some of the lessons I've taught sports guys to actually senior vice presidents of a big manufacturing plant. And it seems to be going well. And that was my light bulb moment. That's when it all came together, when I realized that he was a guy that was almost creating not a new sector, but he was in the training and development business. I knew that. But he was bringing the sports metaphor to bear, but he was using it intelligently. And he was starting to work it and give people tools and techniques, applied learning, that would help them be better executives. And of course, then I think about my dad and my dad's business and being a businessman and doing his P&L. I'm thinking, this is a business I think I'd like to get hold of. And I met the 3M vice president chap, and I talked to him about it. I said, what are you getting from this? And he said, and he was brilliant. And I really liked him and got on well. And he mentored me for a few years afterwards. And in the end, he said, look, you should start a business. You should get these guys out of university and get them in the corporate world. And I was thinking about it anyway. I was thinking, this is a really great idea. And so, yeah, it was then when I realized that these guys, there was a market, and there was not, but it was a very different financial model. And that was the other thing I had to get my head around, which was, you've got this renter hero could go, I don't know, X thousands of pounds for a 1 hour speech, or you like a few £100 a day for consulting, facilitating teams at that point. And so you have to work a whole day to get what I might get for, I don't know, or you have to work for 10 days to get what I could get for 1 hour speech. So my ego had to get away from that, going, okay, well, let go of all that, because you don't want to be that. Let's learn to be a consultant. Let's learn to do a day rate. And let's build this business on a volume base, which isn't just about one-off hits and one-off hero stories, but actually let's build training programs. Let's build leadership programs, and let's plug in some great people.
And when I first met you, I mean, it was whilst I was editing HR magazine, and I think you were already a few years into into Lane 4 then. And the thing that struck me about you, and I never forgot it, was here I was having lunch with somebody who had been an Olympic champion and so on. Was how little you talked about that. You were talking much more about the business, and I because I'd met a lot of sort of ex-sportsmen or former sportsmen, and who had been sort of almost like, it felt like they were sort of hankering back to the old days and the glory days, and about how quickly we kind of moved on from that bit of the conversation to the business stuff, which was in itself incredibly interesting. And so I suppose, what did the business obviously had a name, Lane 4, which was obviously had the link to fastest qualifying lane in swimming, but was there a point where you sort of felt, I'm really starting to feel like a businessman who used to do sport rather than the sportsman who people just see as dabbling a bit in business? Did you sort of have this kind of, not craving, but a sort of desire to be sort of taken seriously in almost like a different discipline?
Yeah, and actually the start of this question, answered that in some ways. We didn't meet until a few years into Lane 4, because actually I told the guys, I don't want us to go out into the marketplace and talk about who we are until we've got credibility, and we've started to work with clients. We've done some good work. We've proven the thing, and then we can start to talk about who we are, because then people might be interested in what we do rather than who I used to be. Because I think that, and I remember saying to the guys, the biggest problem, my biggest issue will be with this business if I end up on the back pages of the newspaper again. We need to be in the business section, because I think a big shift in my personality, and I think I probably is the coaching piece, right? So being the athlete to being the coach, I might have made a coach because that's what I like doing. And actually, what I realized was I was going to enable other people. I didn't need my own personal success. I knew that it was going to be leading a squad of people. It just happened to be in business. So, who's the best psychologist? Who's the best marketeer? Who's the best consultant development person? And find those people and then put them together. So I realized, I think when I was about in my 30s, when I was doing the swimming job, I really liked putting together a project team and helping them really be good at what they did. And just, it goes back to that thing. I just needed to be in the background. I didn't need to be the foreground. I'd had enough of all that. And so that's why I didn't talk about it as much. I wanted to go, look, no, this is about these great people. This is about this great work they've done. Look what we've done here. Look what we've done there. And we're going to carry that on. But I think, it was about my late 20s, as I retired from swimming, the first couple of years in a swimming job, that I started to understand the shift in identity. And it wasn't until we started talking, probably the first 5 years of Lane 4, that I started just about to think, I'm now turning into a businessman. When our revenue got over $1 million or whatever, and you're going, okay, that's a number that I can associate with. Therefore, we've done something okay. We've started this business. So yeah,
it was very interesting, because whenever I came to visit your offices, the people I met there was a real kind of energy and vibrancy sort of in there, which I absolutely loved, and there were a lot of people in there who had, as you were pointing out, alluding to earlier, previously worked in a sort of in a sporting area or had been athletes and so on. However, I was struck by how quickly you sort of, or I stopped thinking about that once I was in there and dealing with the business. What I did feel, though, was the residual energy that often comes from people who've been in a sporting environment. Yeah. My question about that is, there were probably quite a lot of people who had been in that previous environment who were kind of knocking on your door saying, kind of, give us a job. as you sort of developed and grew.
Yeah.
But what made those people different? I mean, in terms of, was it their ability to adapt to a new environment, perhaps? You tell me.
Yeah, so the people we chose that had a sports background, first and foremost, were the psychologists, because that was almost like the people that are capable of applied work with whoever, a high performer, business, whatever. So they were very good at understanding their stuff and applying it. So they were our first group of people. Any ex-athlete that came to me, I wanted to check with them that they didn't have a hankering to talk about the past. I needed to know that they wanted a new career and they're prepared to not start again, but start again to some point. But I knew they'd have, resilience, they'd try something, they were coachable, set goals, worked hard, focused, all those sorts of qualities. But I needed them to think about themselves as a junior trainee and not whatever medal they got or whatever position it had. But I found that, and actually, some of our best people were, good, national representatives, but maybe never made an Olympics or made the Commonwealth Games, and which is awesome. But actually, were people who knew that they needed another life, another career, and weren't hankering from some past stuff. And I think the other thing was wanted to be in the squad environment. Because I think that's one thing that those people who've been involved in that felt before is when you're in somewhere where you've got, and it's like a healthy culture, by the way, because we've all been in ones that haven't been healthy in sport and business, but where it feels quite vibrant, like you said. And that's what we wanted to create, a place of energy where it felt good to be in. You felt like you could be open with each other. You'd share ideas. You'd be work hard, but also play hard. And that sort of stuff was really important. And I think the most important thing also, because I knew we hired occupational psychologists and other people into the business, like, financial professionals or IT professionals as we started to build our back office. I wanted them to feel equally special. I didn't want there to be a barrier between anybody who had done sport and hadn't. So really quickly, we wanted to create a culture which helps people fit in. So I think once you got picked in, you're in. You don't worry about whether you've played badminton for your country or your county. It's irrelevant, actually. Much more interested is that you want to be in this place and you want to give in the same sort of way. And there's plenty of people that haven't had a sports career that are like that and are looking for that sort of place. And so we wanted that to be true from very early days. We wanted people to feel not different or isolated because they hadn't, but they were just one of the group that had been chosen, right?
And you were developing that business, and I really felt that kind of the energy that you're sort of describing, and the kinds of people that were working there, and the great job they did in representing the company. But were you yourself, as that business was growing, were you going through any sort of growing pains yourself in terms of how to be a leader in this situation, a company that's not only washing its face but is actually thriving and profitable? And I mean, were you going through challenges at that point in terms of, how do I carry on? How do I develop? I'm facing new challenges all the time.
Yeah, it's a great question, Trevor. I think what was really helpful, obviously, was we were doing leadership development. Almost like our external stuff was available to me. And I think I think it was year 5, our motto for January, we always had a little kickoff meeting. And our motto was Lane 4 does Lane 4 to itself this year. I remember because I had heard so many of these stories of the cobbler's children or whatever, the companies that didn't look after themselves in the same way they looked after customers. Look, we've got some great stuff. Let's do it to ourselves. And that was true of me as a leader as well. So we almost like we talked to companies about great leadership. And so I kept on measuring myself up against that. And I had no shortage of people prepared to give me feedback as well. These are all consultants that work out there. Once I'd open that door saying, hey, we're going to be as good as we can be, it's like, well, okay, here's where you're doing well and here's where you're not doing so well. So, and I think I had always been quite good with feedback anyway, because that's the only way you get better as an athlete. So I just sort of, it was a bring it on kind of phase really, but it wasn't easy. No, you're dead right. I might have a view on the strategy like that old control thing, which I think I'd shaken off. Yeah. And there's some version of, here's what I would like to do. But then I'm in a squad. I'm in a group of people. I've got equal shareholders. Even though I was managing director, I had friends and friendships and people who'd founded the company. And that was an interesting navigation point. And that probably happened about 8 to 10 years in, when we started to realize that just because you own shares in the company you were founded, it didn't mean that you were necessarily good at a job. And so we made that split between the professional roles that had to be done and the ownership. And we jiggled that around. That's quite painful, actually. And we navigated that okay, I think, in the end. But it did mean that I had to I was tested as to whether I was the right person to be the managing director, because a couple of other people wanted senior roles but didn't get them, even though they're shareholders, because they weren't good enough for that role, and that was difficult conversations to have. So professionalizing it and getting the right people in roles was uncomfortable. It was challenging, but it helped me. Yeah, I had to step up, and I guess I wouldn't have stayed in that job if I wasn't delivering and for the guys. So,
did you find it what success was at that point? If you're in a swimming pool, it's very simple. You go at a certain speed or not, you break a world record or not, you get a medal or you don't. And yet the measures of success in a business are multiple. You could revenue, profitability, happiness in your team or not. All these things. I mean, when there's more variables involved, did you sort of have an adaptation period in that as well?
Yes, and I think one of the helpful things was Graham had created this, I think you're aware of this, a view of a high-performance environment. So very early on, some IP that he created was around what is a high-performance environment, and it absolutely had those different facets. Of course, it could be a financial, it could be a well-being, it could be a operation excellence, it could be an innovation measure. And I mean, literally those four, probably, I've just named them. We were looking at those four areas very early on. So I remember us talking about growth. And then, it was an equal debate about growth at what cost. So what do we want? Okay, if that's our revenue growth, what do we want our well-being score to be, engagement score? And if that's true, because we'd also worked with 3M, remember? So I love the innovation goals of 3M. It's like 3 or 5 years from now, we're going to get revenue from something that hasn't been invented yet, as a sort of phrase. And so we had innovation goals about new products that we were revenuing from in 5 years' time. So that meant we had to have a research team. And so we were quite good, I think, at paying attention to those. And interestingly, a couple of years, we missed a couple of financial targets. And we were debating as a board the messaging to the business at the end of year. But everything else had gone really well. And I went, we've got to go out with that this has been a great year. Because in the round, if we are talking about performance in the round, this has been a great year, and we missed our revenue. Maybe, I don't know, say it was a 10 million year and we missed it by 100,000. That's a great year because our engagement was 85%, whatever, customer satisfaction was whatever, net promoter. And so that's quite important. You need alignment on that as a leadership team. These are sort of lessons I'm learning, and as I learned to grow the business, which is you've got to walk the talk. And so measuring and playing importance on those things equally. If you say that's what's important at the beginning of the year, bloody better stand by it.
I'm going to move on in a minute to the sort of like the phase of the growth, if you like, prior to you being bought by EY. But I just wanted to ask you about the values at Lane4, because you had a post recently where you talked about 4 values, shared Lane values, pushing boundaries, contagious curiosity, people champions, and growing communities. I mean, why these values rather than any others, and what did they do to contribute to the success? How did you come up with them to start with?
I mean, it was probably I think it was our third iteration of values. I think we started it in year 3 or 4, when one of the consultants said, we enjoy being here. What's our magic? If for ourselves, really, what's our magic? What keeps it? So we had a list of words, care. We had some standardized ones you might see anywhere, but they meant something to us. And we had some sentences, like care or operation excellence has always been in there, some sort of operational goodness. But as this last set evolved, the whole company got involved, because again, we'd done the values sessions with clients, and so we kind of thought we did do it for clients, so we thought, well, let's do that to ourselves. And so everybody got involved. It was really a sort of filtering process, bottom to top, and what does everybody else want, and what do we like about what we've had, and what could we build on. And so it was quite a good process, and I had to let go of all sorts of things in that process. And what we wanted to do, we looked at the communities that mattered, and if you look at those things, pretty much in all those things, you can find something that matters to you. Because I think a great set of values where each of individual will go, yeah, that one, or they're speaking to me, I can see myself in there. I might be, growing communities. We have some people who, or contagious curiosity, for instance, our research team loves that one because they're a research team, right? But that also means we want to care about each other and ask each other questions. That's sort of, the feeling. So every value faced inward and faced outward as well. So I think they were massive for us, because I think that as you've worked in this world as much as I have, that values guide your decision making. That's pretty much it. And they'll determine the culture, because what you value, you behave against and make decisions against, and all those decisions, all those behaviors create a culture. And so being quite clear on what they are help you make choices along the way. And those choices are on recruitment, those choices are on promotion, those choices are on clients you accept or don't accept, depending on how they treat you. There'll be all sorts of things. And yes, I think they were huge for us. And yeah, they stood us in really good stead, I think.
Now, as you rightly say, they drive results, and you got really good results. And but what I'm interested in is that we kind of build up towards this period where somebody says, "I want to buy you. I want to buy Lane 4." So EY. Was that always your intention to be bought, or did you not? Because some people start out saying we want to be bought at a certain point, and you build in order to exit, and other people start businesses with nothing like that particularly in mind. They're not quite sure where they're going. Where did you fit in on this one?
It's interesting. It's an interesting one. I think it's also circumstantial in lots of degree, given the 5 years of business, that have preceded all this in terms of COVID, frankly. Yes, and so some of us, it'd been quite difficult. We'd grown quite well, and we weathered the 2008, 2009 crash quite nicely. So we came through that, and we had some tough choices that I think we let a few people go, not many, like 4 or 5, but sort of tighten the ship up a little bit then. Just to stay on point though, no, our intention wasn't to be bought. I like the fact we were independent, we were building scale. And yet, as we headed towards COVID, we hurt, like every other business hurt, because a lot of our work was face-to-face. We'd created a digital strategy the year before COVID, which helped us, and I think kept us alive, because we'd started to commoditize and stick stuff online, some online learning. We started doing virtual classrooms, even for global clients before COVID. And so we had a team that was set up, a digital team of about 6 people. But it was hard. We'd furloughed lots of people. We weren't able to deliver the way we were. And we'd had offers to be bought way before, particularly the Big Four. I mean, I've got to be careful who I talk about here, but the Big Four have been coming at us for quite a while, actually. And we've been holding it off. We partnered with most of them, and we are currently partnering with EY on the Met Police. It was like the London, with Leading for London. That was their leadership program to help Cressida Dick tackle the culture in the Met Police. I think we're seeing the lancing of the Boyle at the moment. But so working with EY, and we enjoyed our work with EY, and that was great. And they came at us before COVID, and we said no, we're not interested. But what also happened at the time is, we're getting a bit older, right? So there are 4 protagonists in Lane 4 who own shares, and 3 of us turned 60 in, I think, we had to turn 60. We turned 60 this year, by the way. So if you look back 3 years ago when EY bought us, we're heading towards that sort of, we're getting a little bit older. How do you realize value in the company? We'd made this digital play, and we realized that we needed quite a chunk of change to build our own platform. So we were looking, so actually what we were doing was we're going, okay, should we go private equity? Should we get some money in, get some investment to build a digital platform? Shall we do, go on an AIM thing? Actually, do we go out and get some money that way? And the trade sale has always interested us, because we thought if we pick the right company who are like us, values-wise and purpose-wise, it might be quite nice to tuck into somebody else, because we'd enjoyed partnering with the big guys, because we're doing some interesting and different work. So it was almost like this. And by the way, we were absolutely knackered after COVID. So it's almost like, because we actually did okay. So we went down and we rebuilt, and our forward order was better than it had been before COVID. So we had a 1-year nice bounce back, and future earnings were looking good. But when they came along, it was like, well, they've got a platform, a digital platform. We can tuck in, and we can feel like we're being supported going forward. They've got some great, interesting clients. Our guys will do some fun work, because a lot of the interesting work, the big interesting work, Big Four tend to be prime, and they tend to need that on top. Like the Met, we could never win it by ourselves because of the scrutiny that spending would be under. So you had to partner a Big Four anyway. So, and also career choices. We were very conscious that all of us were hanging around still, all the key protagonists in the board jobs, and and we're heading towards our 50s, and we've got some brilliant 30-year-old, late 20s, 30s, 40-year-olds who, glass ceiling, we had no space to promote them. So you go, okay, well, EY offers a chance for some of those guys to become partners, to become, to really have career opportunities. So we weighed it up, and it was really hard. It absolutely was hard, but it felt like a good time. It was the right timing thing at that time. Now, I'm a big fan of, I won't talk about it as an experience. I can talk superficially or level at a high level about it as an experience. I've got to be careful.
Of course.
But all in all, you look back on it and go, it was the right decision with the information, the way we felt at the time. I'm a big fan of that, right? You can't regret anything. You go, okay, I made these decisions with everything I have, and I try and get as much as I can. We made that decision, and it was the right one with what information we had then.
So the basics of philosophy of you never regret the things you do, but you might regret the things you don't do. And you thought, shall I jump through this moment? And you kind of went for it. And here you are 3 years later, and now you've left EY. And if there is a limit to what you can say, please stop me. In terms of being at EY, you said recently in a post, I went from advising senior leaders in large corporates to being a senior leader in a large corporate, and from advising on the best way to take an organization through a successful transformation to leading my own large scale transformation.
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, suddenly going from the advisorial role to sort of being in the role. I mean, can you just take me a little bit through that?
Yes, and I will. And I've got a funny thing. Remind me to tell you about my brother in a minute.
Okay.
At the end of this, because it's quite an amusing story around it. But so the transformation I had to take to Lane 4, I've got to take. I think we're about 180 people at that point, and we'd been 240 pre-COVID, but we're 180. So I'm taking 180 people into a new organisation. So it's an integration. It's not a merge. It's a kind of a merger, but it's not. It's a takeover. So so I say I, but I'm managing director. But we as a board and a group of leaders are navigating our people through this massive change of all the way from emotional change down to physical change. So we'd grown up quite, big time grown up. We had our own systems. You had our own CRM. We just put an ERP system in. So, but every system in EY was different from Lane 4 system. so we had to sort of get everybody back onto a new system on day one. So the pain of the operational system change of transformation, we'd been, as a consultant, I'd advise companies on their emotional transition and transformation and how leaders lead. But of course, and the change guys do the back office transformation. So I've actually got navigating my own people through back office transformation and the emotions that go with that. So that sort of integration. And by the way, EY already had about 80 talent professionals, and it was a double integration. So I took my 160 into EY, and they gave me the 80 that were already there and said, right, these 80 that had joined EY are now EY Lane 4. So I've got to bring these 80 with me as well. And so You've got this double thing happening.
Did you feel like Moses leading people into the promised land?
Well, I'll tell you what, it was a fascinating thing. I mean, it was brilliant because I think I experienced all the things I'd been working for 15, 20 years with the leaders I was advising. And so it hasn't dramatically changed how I advise those people now. I would advise them, but it's definitely helped with some of the nuances of empathy. I mean, from first-hand empathy, but also I understand a lot of the competing tensions now more than I ever did. And then, but I'm being a senior leader in a corporate, you are the vagaries of corporate world. I mean, I made my own choices normally, because I was an entrepreneur and action, reaction, whereas in EY, there's all sorts of, it's an audit firm, right? It's regulated. It's like I would hate to use the bureaucracy of a big B or a little B, whatever, but there is bureaucratic process, and for a reason, just, you can get sued if you do an audit, whatever. But it's applied to everything, which I found quite frustrating and challenging. I talk about my brother because, going back to that story about my dad, so I have one brother and he's younger than me, and he was also doing my dad's books when we were kids, and so he ended up in the corporate world, and he now runs Coca-Cola in the UK. So he's a GM of Coca-Cola. So he's big corporate, and he always has been. He went straight from university into Swire in the Far East. And so he's always been corporate. And he laughed when he realized that I was going to end up as a partner in EY. He said, I can't believe that you're going to do that. Because he knew me because I was the entrepreneur side of my dad, and he was the corporate side of my dad, if you like. And we were always laughing about that. And then in the end, and it got even more funny when I was told that I wasn't allowed to talk to him about work because we audited Coca-Cola. so I'm a consultant at EY, and both he and I had to sign conflict agreement type thing.
Then you've just left EY. You've come to the end of that sort of period, and to what? But thinking about overall in terms of lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur, I mean, is there if you had to put your finger on sort of like 2 or 3 things that you learned along the way that maybe you could pass on to our listeners, would there be anything?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think everyone's going to say it's like, keep it as simple as you can, right? Because it's hard to focus on lots of things. There's a reason why I wasn't a triathlete. If I could, I swam and I concentrated on swimming. So I think there's something about, and that's what I learned when we got to EY. It got very complicated very quickly, and so there's something about not overextending the range of everything you do. Now, I'm a big fan of Ansoff's matrix, right? I mean, I don't want to bring business models into this, but like, look that one up, because effectively you've got a product, you've got a marketplace, and where you expand, whether you take your existing product to new customers, or where you existing customers, you find a new product to take them. You can't do everything at once. If you totally diversify as an entrepreneur, you end up with this out of control thing. A big fan of pruning the tree. I love metaphors, by the way. So the idea that your tree's going to grow, you're going to have to prune the branches and keep it so it's not an unruly bush. And so I think that for entrepreneurs, great idea, I'll run down that idea, and then I'll chase that one for a bit. Great idea, I'll run down that one. So keep it simple, focus on what you're really good at, and expand in line with a market strategy or a product strategy, and trim it every now and again when you need to sort of make sure you're not going out of control, and be honest with yourselves.
Did you learn those lessons through not applying them at any point in the past?
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All the life's best lessons are when you kind of screw it up, aren't they? But then also we did it right a couple of times. So screw up and then work out the lesson, and then apply it and realize you've done it at the right time. So we did a few that we but innovate, like the digital innovation was driven out of that. And it happened, as I say, a year before COVID, but our culture was such, and our curiosity was such, not to stifle innovation, but to allow it to go when it needed to go. And so we had planned that, and luckily, I say luckily, but you plan your own luck, don't you? So that happened before COVID, so that helped us through.
So what are you up to now, Adrian? I mean, it's like, in terms of you've come to the end of one chapter. You've sort of hinted in one of your posts that you're sort of plotting new things and so on. Maybe you can't tell me, but have you got a sense of sort of what area they would be in? I mean, I can't imagine you'd be quiet for very long.
No, it's an interesting one, because I think so I've got a few things outside, and I've not talked much about them. I've got a couple of things that are related to sport, actually, in terms of chairman, non-exec type thing, and I'll talk a bit more about those as they come up, but they're not quite launched yet. Actually, no, one of them is a guy called Tom Dean, who's Olympic champion. He's from Maidenhead, which is just around the corner. He's started a group of his swim schools. I mean, I was talking to him about his passion for everybody learning to swim, and lots of kids leave school, particularly in deprived areas, not near being able to swim. It's a life-saving skill. So he's starting that up, and he wanted somebody to look at the operation of the business, and so I'm chairing that as an advisor, because I also chair the trust in Windsor and Maidenhead that run all the facilities here. And so I've got the chief exec involved. And so it's a charitable piece, and, we're looking at a sport that matters to me, but I'm also using my business acumen. So it's quite helpful having an ex-Olympic swimmer who understands how to run a business to try and help him, the current Olympic swimmer, to make it work. But there's some other brilliant professionals, by the way. As I say, I'm just chairing that, but there are some other brilliant professionals we've got around it to make it work.
Look, there's so much in there. I don't know where to start. That was absolutely brilliant. So thank you to Adrian. Adrian's already lived two high performance lives, one as an elite swimmer and the other as a top businessman. And very, very few people are successful at both. And I love his thoughts about keeping things simple and pruning the tree regularly to maintain a focus. And he gave us some clues there on the next phase of his professional life, which I'm quite sure will be hugely successful as well. Please don't apologise for the many metaphors, Adrian. We love them here on this show. Thank you to Adrian, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast or our business Merrible Media, you can find us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to join us for our next episode. But until then, thanks for listening.